This is Matt Rosen, and this is the Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of the Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hi, this is Matt Rosen, and you're listening to the Grit Mindset podcast with yours truly, your host, Matt Rosen. I am really excited to have a good buddy of mine on today. I'd like to, here in a second, introduce Scott Harper. He's a super successful tech entrepreneur. I'm happy to call him a friend, a mentor, and was even a competitor of mine for a while. So looking forward to hearing Scott's story and what he can share with this audience about grit. So welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. Scott, welcome to the show. I'd love to hear.
Thank you.
You just give a little bit of an intro to the audience, let them know who I'm talking to today.
Yeah, so my name's Scott Harper. Most recently, I was running a company called Dialexa, which was a product engineering firm. We started in really late 2010, early 2011. We spun out a few other companies along the way with that, and automotive technology, robotic lawn care, women's health tech. We sold Dialexa to IBM in October of 2022. And I, as of October of 2024, left, passed the torch onto my COO. She became the CEO and is running the company now. So I'm enjoying a bit of a break. I'll call it a mini retirement.
Well, glad you're able to share a little bit of your retirement time with us and come on the Grit Mindset. And we'll get to retirement because I'm looking forward to getting there one day. But to get us started, I'd love to hear a little bit about your early life and really some of the experiences that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is a little town called, it's actually the second biggest city in Arkansas. I think it may have now been surpassed by Springdale, but it was 85,000 people. It'll show you how small Arkansas is compared to like Dallas or Texas, the other big cities that were around. But grew up there. My dad was an orthodontist. I'm one of 6 kids. I ended up coming to school at SMU. Fun fact, I'm thinking we've got to hold some kind of record at this point. All 6 kids in our family went to SMU.
No kidding.
The last one, my youngest brother, Clay, actually rounded out and got his PhD there. So we literally just left SMU as a family.
So SMU's a big fan of the Harpers.
Big fan of the Harpers. My dad's still looking for them to name a building after him there. So. But yeah, so I grew up there. I think things that were really, formative in my upbringing were, hard work was like a really big thing to my dad. And so, my friends would all know this, coming over, they have to be careful coming over because we might be out in the yard installing a sprinkler system or, installing a telephone system, doing something. My dad used to make us, get up before school and water trees at 5 a.m., especially if we'd got in trouble the night before. If he knew we were out late, he almost would never actually get us in trouble or say anything, but it's just, you got the call at 5 a.m. to come water trees, before school or, get up. But I think that he still likes to, by the way, send my older brother and I pictures of us standing in trenches when there's snow and ice outside, just reminding us of the good times. But we definitely didn't always love that kind of stuff growing up, but I definitely look back really fondly of that. And I think that, that really left an impression on me. And it was just something that, no matter what your talent level was, you could always work hard. That's something anybody can do.
Yep.
It's within your control. And I am a huge believer that, that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. It's we are all talented at something. If you combine that with hard work, you're really difficult to compete with. So I think those are the things that really stand out to me, from an upbringing perspective.
No, that's great. So if your kids misbehave or they're out at 5 a.m. watering.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to use some of these tricks. Luckily mine are young enough to where if they're out till 5 a.m., that's probably more on me than them.
No, that's great. So, how would you say that your upbringing really influenced your approach to challenges and setbacks? Because you've been a serial entrepreneur. We'll talk more about that. But how did that really get you ready for what you were going to face in the working world?
Yeah, I think I mean, one, I played sports, right? And so I think that that's one of the great things about kids playing sports is like, you learn to get your ass kicked. I mean, and then you got to get back out there, right?
Yep.
I tell my kids, I'm like, you can do one of two things here after you lose. And it sucks, right? Nobody likes to lose. And, you can do one of two things. You can give up or you can go practice even harder and come back for more, and then over time you see yourself improve and eventually you start winning, right?
Yep.
And so I think that, again, while I think in my, household growing up, like, not quitting was a big thing. I think in sports, like that really taught me a lot about that real world stuff, not just somebody telling you, but something you experience, right? Like I lost, like I got beat down. I went back, I put in the work and I did better next time, right? Like, so I think that was really, really formative for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sports are a great way to get really trained on grit. And so as obviously we're on the grit mindset, grit means something a little bit different to everyone. I'd love to hear what it means to you, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, grit's one of those words that I think is almost like an umbrella term. It contains a lot, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot wrapped up in such a short, simple word. But, I think for me, grit really, speaks to passion, perseverance, resilience, right? And like I think that it's all those things. It's really a word that describes like what winners do in the face of adversity, right?
Yep.
And it's when you demonstrate passion, you get knocked down, and you are passionate, right, about what you're doing and about winning, and then that perseverance of like you don't give up, and resilience is like bouncing back. It's just the don't give up, bounce back when you're down. That's really what that word means to me. It's something that we talked a lot about at our company, was just like we were gritty. And I think that the perseverance, I almost used like a different word that I used to use at Dialexa a lot, when we were especially in that like, kind of crossing the chasm phase of like, hey, are we going to make it or not, right? Was that, durability is a really underrated characteristic of a business, right? Like how hard is it to kill you, because if you don't die, like you can live to fight another day, you're still in the game. It's just staying in the game. And, I always, used to think back that a lot of the people that we worried about competitors, and it's funny because you and I operated in such a big space. We've actually had this conversation before because you and I actually like helped each other, and we're like, things I knew a lot about that maybe you weren't as experienced in, and vice versa, and we just shared, learnings because, we talked to her like, this space is so big, this industry is so big, like we're both meaningless. We know large consulting firms who have individual engagements that are bigger than both of our revenues combined, right? So it's a massive, world. And, I think that the people we used to worry about, most of them didn't survive, right? Like they just they didn't make it. And we thought back of, how silly is that, But in any case, like I think it's just like, pushing through hard times. It's everything it takes to do that. That's really what grit means to me. And that's from a personal and professional standpoint is, you always just have to like pull yourself back up, make it through, keep your eye on the prize, and you do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah, no, we had some good conversations, good times throughout our career starting our firms. And, one thing it'd be great for you to share with the audience is what inspired you to start Dialexa, and what are some of the challenges of those early days, as you say, crossing the chasm?
Yeah, I think, when we started Dialexa, so I was not a consulting guy. I mean, so I'd say like, the hardest thing about starting Dialexa, probably, aside from being dead broke when we did it, was the fact that neither my co-founder nor I had ever done consulting or professional services before. So, that's, does not make a whole lot of sense at its surface level. You go start a business, something you've never done or don't know anything about. Ironically, there's so many entrepreneurial success stories that sound like that because you almost, it's that you don't know what's so hard about it. Now, having done it, I'm like, I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. That really was hard. But, we started it because we were at an enterprise SaaS company, and my co-founder, Mark, and I, and, what we saw, we were selling into a lot of these, Fortune 100, even Fortune 10 companies. And we dealt a lot with their IT departments. This is circa 2009, 2010. And, it was always, we were technology product guys building a SaaS product, selling it into market. And, most of the people we were selling into were these IT departments, and they were good at, some of them were, a lot better than others, but it really understanding like how to use technology to enable a business. Most of the stuff was off the shelf that they did, product engineering, what we knew how to do, and building products, designing, architecting, engineering products. That was something that we really recognized quickly they were not very good at. Almost, I can't think of a single, client that we were working with in these really giant companies that really knew how to build great software, by modern standards. And so, when we started thinking about it, when we left, and we left under, some pretty interesting circumstances, kind of a disagreement in ethics with the, the founder of that company, we decided, we met the next day and we're like, hey, let's do something together. We left the same day. And one of the things that we, aside from just survival in the beginning, one of the things we recognized was the challenges these companies had. And we thought, look, this is, technology has got to be a competitive advantage, for every company. Every industry, regardless of what it is going to be one with technology. We believe that wholeheartedly. This is about the time frame where Mark Andreessen talked about software eating the world. Yep. And I think we were saying a similar thing before that blog post came out, not nearly as eloquently as Mark said it, nor as big of an audience, right? But it was something that we definitely recognized. We had that same observation, right? And so we thought, well, these companies, they really need this in order to be, good at this, in order to win their industry and their space on a go forward. Like, they have to have these capabilities. They don't know how to do it. They're not very good at it. They're going to need a partner to help them do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the genesis of Dialexa and what we did and the value we wanted to bring in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, you built a hell of a firm, and you guys did some great work. I think many people there probably use some of the digital products you built today. You don't even realize they're engineered by Dialexa. So maybe share a failure or a challenge, a really hard one that you had to overcome in the early days, and how you and Mark, or how you pushed through things.
Yeah, so I think that's that question. There's so many different things, right? As that seems to be, there's a lot more challenges than victories, early on, and for a huge part of running a business, right? There are challenges and curveballs thrown at you all the time. I think a few, one of the bigger ones that, really comes to mind, when you're in a services business, one thing that you always have to watch out for, really any business for that matter, is client concentration risk, which just means like, if you're 10 million in revenue and 9 million of that comes from one client and something happens to them, like, you're in, deep shit, right?
A lot of people to get busy again.
Yeah, it's like, that's a lot of people to get busy again. And so we had this, on a smaller scale than that early on, but we had this early stage company, which was a lot of our early clients were early stage companies. They were people who had an idea or industry expertise. Mm-hmm. They didn't necessarily know how to bring a technology product to market, how to design and build something. And so we had a lot of those types of clients, and we had one in particular that it was one of the biggest contracts it was the biggest contract we'd ever signed. It was still one of the biggest ones we'd signed, ever. And we had pretty much like our whole company working on this, and this guy had said, I've got my money lined up, I have the funding, and made this first payment, which was smaller than the down payment we asked for, but we negotiated. We're like, all right. And then all of a sudden, really pretty much right after that, we start getting slow paid on something, and we're like, all right, hey, where's the money? He's like, I don't know, it's coming, I've got it, I'm just waiting on this thing. Then it became, hey, my investor fell through. And we pretty much, so we got stiffed on, I think it was about a $750,000 payment, and we really had to lock ourselves in a conference room and be like, all right, how are we going to make payroll? How are we going to survive this? And I think it was something we had some kind of runway, like 2 or 3 weeks. And somehow we pulled a rabbit out of a hat. We're like, here are the people we're going to call. Here are the people we know. Like, let's try to get these people busy. Here's our game plan. And we were able to pull it off, and we never missed a payroll. That's something I'm really proud of at Dialexa, is that we were completely bootstrapped, but we never missed a payroll ever, which is, I think, maybe a testament to, some grit and just, unwillingness to compromise. Probably a little bit of luck in there. Just because somebody misses a payroll doesn't mean they necessarily did something wrong, or maybe they did something wrong, but you're always going to do things wrong. But, that was, you kind of went from, I think the hard thing about that was, a couple fold here, in that it was, obviously the financial difficulty, looking out at all these people you care about, you've asked to take a risk in joining you, and you don't want to let them down, their families down. Some had families. And, like the other part of that that's really difficult, and I guarantee you've experienced this, and it's only something you can experience because you can tell people about it, but it never registers until you've been through it, where you go from waking up that morning to being on top of the world and being like, okay, we closed this monster deal. The world, all is right in the world, and we really are on a big breakthrough here. And then it's like somebody just absolutely comes in and crushes all your dreams, like really at a moment's notice, like get blindsided. And that's a really difficult emotional journey to go on, psychological roller coaster that you just feel like, you've got the world by the tail, and then it just gets snatched away from you,
Yeah, for those aspiring entrepreneurs that are out there listening, this is a great example of what you got to do. There's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. You're going to have to ride through the tough ones, and there's probably more tough than good. And
absolutely.
So one thing would be great to hear is, what kind of practices do you have that help you maintain kind of a strong and positive mindset? Because you're an optimistic guy. You and I have hung out a lot, and you've always had a good way about you and thinking of how to maneuver through things. So what would you share to those as they're going through tough times that you do that help you have a gritty mindset?
Yeah, I think, and I always, questions like this, whenever I watch an interview, it's easy to like be watching something and feel like, man, this guy's really he's kind of learned it all and has it all figured out. Like that's always something that, I'd say gave me optimism at time, and then other times it kind of got on my nerves where I'm just like, you'd figure out and you'd hear somebody talking and you'd be like, well, they don't know everything. And so I think that there's, nobody has it all figured out on stuff like that. It's just, there's a lot of suck involved in starting a company. I think the way that you get through those probably, very personal, right? And like different things, for different people. But I think that, things that really are, I think commonalities that you'd hear in that and things that, work for me are just, one, remembering why you're doing something, trying to look out at that future and like, what does that look like when we're past this, rough time, keeping your eye on the prize, so to speak, keeping, an eye out on the horizon, not looking down at your nose short-sighted and that. And then I think that there's just like habits you can do to take care of yourself, right? If you don't take care of yourself to an extent, which I do, pretty poorly at sometimes, too many times, like I think that there's, I don't recall who said this, but somebody said, when talking about like, burnout and depression, all this thing, it said, like, hey, if you're not exercising, eating reasonably healthy, getting some sunshine every now and again, like you're not even giving yourself a fighting chance. And exercise is probably the number one thing for me, that when I do it, like there's a huge difference in like my outlook, like my happiness, like how focused I am. Still, sometimes I can't convince myself to do it.
It's hard.
I know that, right? But, I think there's some like basic things like self-care is important. And that doesn't mean not working hard. You can grind and kill yourself and still do those things. You can fit it all in. Like that's your job as an entrepreneur, by the way. A lot of times it's like do the impossible, because a lot of people are going to go, well, you can't do all that. And it's like, well, not all the time you can't, but like you better figure it out. Like, there's not a connect the dots pathway to that,
Yeah, there's no easy guidebook to being an entrepreneur. So
everybody's done it a little differently. And like what worked for me may not work for you. And you may go, I did exactly what you said, and I fell flat on my face. I'm like, no, I don't know.
Any significant influences or role models during this journey?
Man, there's a lot. I didn't have a single, role model that I'd go, okay, man, I really followed this person start to finish, and that guy to me. I mean, I'm a very big learner. That's a big thing for me, life learner. And I mean, to the point where sometimes some of my team would kind of laugh, like, would you read a new book this week? I'm like, actually, I did, asshole. But like I was always looking to absorb things, and I looked at people I admired, and sometimes that was other founders. Sometimes it was not, right? Sometimes you read about somebody who was just a hardcore operator, may not even really like entrepreneurs and thinks they're a pain in the butt, and they would just cut out the bullshit, right? And they'd be like, hey, get down to brass tacks, like do this, operate with discipline. I think that there was a few books like that I think are really great that, left an impression on me. The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yeah, you told me
by
about
Ben
that. I read that
Horowitz.
early days.
I mean, I think I
Great
told
book.
probably like everybody. I probably told you like 10 times. I think I told everybody about that book 10 times because it was the first book, and I think this, he talks about it in there that somebody was actually talking about, the crappy things about building a business, not just like telling you that how smart they were and all the things they got right. He almost wrote a book about here's all the stuff we got wrong. And I think it really made me feel normal and like I wasn't like the world's biggest idiot in running a business. I'm like, man, I remember telling, I don't recall who it was, like on my team, and I said, I told my wife this too, and I said, I read this book, and it turns out I'm kind of making like every classic mistake in the book. I said, which is, on one hand, makes me feel like an idiot that I'm kind of learning all these things that have already been learned. I said, but the good news is they're all solvable, and there's like answers to all this stuff and a better way to handle it. So I think that book really was impressionable on me. Amp It Up by Frank Slootman, the guy who ran Snowflake and scaled it, is a wonderful book. High Output Management. Some of my team, if they watch, is going to laugh about some of these, but I think that's really great. And then, I had a guy named Daryl Heath who was very impactful to me as a mentor. He ran the Dallas office of Accenture, and, his son even worked for us, still does. And he was very generous with his time in retirement, and we became very close personal friends and just shared a lot of, as I told you earlier in this, like I had never done consulting before. So a lot of the, the basics, I'd say the fundamentals of this business were completely new to me, right? I think we had a fresh perspective, and found a gap in the market, which I think is the most important thing in starting any kind of business, is finding a true need. And then, I would say, friends like you were really, impactful for me. A guy named Keith Jacobs, like you may know Keith, was really great. Very generous with me, early on when he didn't have to be. And then, you have other role models like, my parents, were very influential to me, and I think gave me a lot of the core ingredients to anything I want to go do. I'd be remiss not to mention my wife, and having a supportive partner at home.
Yeah, you give
always,
Lindsay a
always
shout
helps.
out.
Got to give my wife a shout out. Like you have to do that. But no, I mean, in all honesty, like she does deserve a lot of credit there, because it's not always easy living with an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, it's maybe she has the worst job in all of this.
And now she's an entrepreneur. She got two
Yeah.
entrepreneurs living together.
I know.
We'll have to have her on the show. So, that book, I'll call it out again. It was Ben Horowitz, right? The Hard Thing About Hard Things. He started every chapter with a rap quote, which is really pretty cool. You told me about that. I think the first time we met, I read it, loved that book. Highly recommend to those that are listening. So we were talking about relationships. How would you say, relationships and collaborations have really contributed to overcoming difficult situations and been part of your success?
Yeah, I think, relationships are a lot of what gets you through things. I mean, one is just getting outside of your own mind. We've had conversations where, one of us is like, struggling with something, and a lot of times it's almost like the answer and somebody tells you something and it's obvious, and you're like, well, I already knew that, but that's the right answer. So I just needed to hear it, right? And so I think that, having people, a support system is important. I don't care what struggle it is, what you're going through in life, like a support system is important. And I think that there's like, from that personal side, the business side, the family side, these are kind of the three dimensions of that, right? Yeah. And, I already talked about, my wife, my family at home, my kids, like my dad told me, a long time ago, I first had, my oldest daughter, we had our first baby, and he said, one thing you're going to know is like that no matter how bad your day is, when you come home and that little girl is waiting for you at the door and runs and gives you a big hug, like you are not going to care about anything else in the world. Yeah. He's completely right. And like, there's just something about being a human being that like being loved and supported, like you have an innate need for that. And I think professionally, having like a peer group, you and I are both in YPO, that's been super impactful to me. I think, has been for you as well. Just having a bunch of other smart people who are running businesses and sharing their experiences, having other founders in the, the same businesses, similar business you're in. I feel like I've, received a lot, and therefore I feel obligated to give a lot, in that regard. But yeah, I think I've been really blessed to have a lot of people, and then even my coworkers. I mean, some of the people I hired, like I think as the CEO, you're seen as like the most senior person, but I was far junior to a lot of the people on my team, and which is really such a gift if you're able to pull a team together that you can really learn from all the time. Like that's something I would definitely tell everybody is like hire people that are way better than you at whatever thing that you're looking to build or do or whatever your gaps are. Be honest about those, self-aware, and hire people who are all-star at that and learn from them. Like that is something, it's your job to build a really world-class team. And so I don't know about you, but some of my best mentors have been coworkers.
Yeah, no, you have some great people. I know quite a few of them that work for you, and I think that's a testament to your humbleness to be able to hire people that are smarter than you and stay the heck out of their way. That's what I try
all I
to do
ever
as well.
cared about was winning,
Yeah.
and that's a team sport. I knew that from day one, and so anybody who's ever played a team sport, you're like, the only way you're going to win is if you have a team of really talented people, and you can't care about being the best one. The minute you do that, you start losing.
Yeah, no, you want to be part of a winning team. You don't have to be the only one. So, we're running kind of short on time here. What's a final message that you'd like to share with our listeners about developing grit, or things you wish you knew if you could turn the clock back, things you do different?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. There's always things I think you could replay that you might say I would do that differently if I could go back, but I think that that's really part of the experience, and I had so many failures I can't count, and I always really hate it when people say we're going to celebrate failures and all of that. That to me that always felt like loser talk. I'm not judging people for doing that. It was just really, you set out to fail? I never wanted to fail, right? I failed a million times. I never set out to fail. I failed millions of times, it feels like. And, to me, they were always just part of the journey. So I think you just have to accept that, getting your butt kicked and getting back up, that's how you learn. That's how you get better. If you fail, I think the people who failure becomes ultimately their defining characteristic is people who continue to fail and they don't learn from it. If you continue to learn from failures, you treat everything as a learning experience, both your victories and your failures. You can't treat your victories like, oh, we must have gotten everything right, because I guarantee you still got a lot wrong, and that same thing may not work again. So I think if you just got to treat everything as this kind of evolution and this constant learning experience, including your failures, and accept that they're part of the process, know that it's going to hurt, it's going to be painful. You just power through it. You just have to stick with it. Remember why you're doing what you're doing. As long as that, thesis holds true and there's merit to what you're doing and building, failure is just part of it. You're just going to have to do that. You push through it, and you just, eventually you will get to your destination. That's, I think, the things that really got me through is just knowing that we were on to something valuable, something the market needed, and whenever we failed, it wasn't the market failed. It was just hey, we hadn't figured that out. It didn't invalidate what we were trying to do. It just invalidated something about us, whether that was not having the right team on the field or not calling the right plays, what have you.
Well, super valuable insights. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing everything with me and our listeners. Any final closing thoughts before we sign off?
Oh, man. No, I'd just say, enjoy the ride. There's a lot of suck in it. It's certainly not all rainbows and butterflies, but surround yourself, with a great team, get a worthwhile mission, right? And, just, do work that matters with people that you want to surround yourself with. If you do great things with great people, the success is going to come.
Yeah. Let's say, life is short. You got to enjoy the people you're doing things with. You got to be excited about the things you're working on. And as one of my buddies sometimes says, embrace the suck.
Yes. Embrace the suck, right? Or the obstacles, the way there's 100, I think Mike Tyson is the one who said, do the things that you hate to do like you love them,
Yeah. Well, inspiring words. Scott, thanks for being a friend and a mentor. It was always fun competing with you. We always had a good time, always had lots of good conversations. And thanks so much for coming on The Grit Mindset. And for our listeners, hopefully you can take away some good nuggets. Scott's had an awesome career, and I know he will do great things in the future, so great to have him on. Hopefully you took something away. And so signing off on this episode of the Grit Mindset, stay gritty.